a little bit of extra protein at that time. The other reason why I don't make a big deal with protein is the fact that the range for hays that are sampled by Dairy 1, for 12 and 13 was from 7 to almost 14% crude protein. So most of the time, Minnesota forages contain a sufficient amount of protein, so we don't worry too much about it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't sample, because if you are at the 7% range, look at how much protein they will need, especially after they start milking. So you're going to need to make that up with a tremendous amount of protein so that those cows are not lacking protein, they're not going to lag behind in getting bred, et cetera, et cetera. Now the interesting thing when you get old like me, you can play around with data. You can totally go off course, quit talking about alternative feeds and get into some other fun things that maybe can get us all thinking back on how we do things on our own farms. So what I've done is gone back to the Farm Business Management reports from 2002 to 2012, and they categorize those as 3 different types of individuals or farms. One would be average profit, that would be about 60% of the farms pretty much in the middle, and they take the 20% high profit and the 20% low profit, and they're represented one by a red line to show low profit and one by a green line to show profitability. Eric will talk to you later about what that means in terms of actual dollars and where some other factors affect costs and returns of these cow-calf operations. He's done a nice job of putting together Minnesota data for you to digest here a little later. What I have for you is what I've always talked about before is how do we manage intake on our cows? We're talking about a beef cow. We're not talking about a feedlot steer. If we were talking about feedlot steer, we would want that intake to be high with the expectation that they would gain weight and that our feed efficiency would be where it needs to be. On a cow, we want that line to really be as steady as possible. This is pounds of feed used for the entire herd prorated to a single brood cow. So if you had 100 cows, you probably own 4 to 5 bulls. You probably have a string of 14 to 20 replacement heifers, and you probably have to feed a little bit of creep feed. All of those feed needs of all those animals prorated down to the cows you own that are going to produce that calf. So that's about divided by 100 in that scenario. What that number translates to, if you can remember something, is about 8,000 pounds of dry matter per cow per year. This is winter feed needs. It does not include grazing. All right, so if you were saying, how much feed do I need to have on a dry matter basis per cow per year? It's about 8,000 pounds. Right? That's very simple. Try and remember. We can whittle that down to a per cow basis for what you have to offer them. We've talked about that. And that is about roughly 1 round bale per cow per month. So about 1,000 pounds of hay per month, what you're going to have an inventory to feed the cows directly. But this is different. This is all the animals in that herd at about 8,000. What the average profit folks are doing is staying pretty much around that number. They went up a little bit in 09. There was probably drought. Back down in 11 and then back up in 12. And again, we had a little bit of a drought back then. About the low profit. What's the thing you can say about low profit people? One thing. They haven't settled on how much to feed their cows, right? Sometimes too much, sometimes too little. My bias going to do this analysis was that they were going to be at 9,500 pounds across. No, they're not. They're probably still at about 85 to 8,800 pounds, but it's been going up and down, up and down. So something is going on in their minds and their operations to determine the fact that they haven't settled on something. Whether it's they don't plan well, they don't have enough land resources for the cows they carry, their feed's got a weight on them as far as they don't measure what they're delivering, who knows. I just wanted to point out, this is nothing we made up, this is the behavior of these categories of farms over about an 11-year cycle, which is kind of intriguing to see. The high profit folks, you would expect them perhaps all to be down in the 7,500 pound, and actually they were early in the 2000s, then they climb up to average, and now they're coming back down to about the last year, 2012, one of the lowest for feed usage by them. What this tells me is they're watching what price trends are doing and watching their inventories, matching them to the actual needs of those cattle. If we were to average the high profit against the average profit, I think the values would be pretty similar. So we can't say that the high profit operators are always restrict feeding their cows. If they're watching the conditions, if feeds are very expensive, they get pretty cheap, right? And as long as it does not impact output, calves wean, percentage of calves wean, or pounds of weaning weight, then they should be doing pretty good. So these guys are testing the waters to see how far they can limit that cow while still maintaining production. What I wanted to point out is roughly in a single cow year, if you wanted to have a value to remember, we said about 8,000 pounds. The lower range is actually 7,800 pounds. So if you have 100 cows and you sell calves at weaning, you're not going to need any background in feed once the calves are weaned. You should be planning on about 8,000 pounds of dry matter per cow per year. If you retain calves through backgrounding, then you're allowed to go to almost 10,000 pounds per cow per year of dry matter, because it will account for some of the backgrounding calves that are. If you are in any of this range, assuming that you're backgrounding calves and you're okay, if you have no calves that you retain and you do your own math and you're feeding about 9,500 pounds of dry matter per year, you're probably overfeeding your cows, or somebody sneaking in and grabbing feed from your pile somewhere.